Welcome to House of Decline. This is our 120th episode, and before we get into the show, I just want to ask everyone to go to patreon.com/House of Decline and subscribe. You can get a daily comic. Every single day there's a new comic that's not posted anywhere else, only on Patreon, and they're raunchy and graphic.
Oh, cool. Yeah, there's a lot of straight-up pornography.
It's not pornography.
It's not pornography.
It is not that. But we have a very special guest with us today that I'm going to have Alex introduce. And Alex, please.
Movie reviewer, media archivist, podcaster, poster extraordinaire. We have Esther at Cappy Baroness. Thank you for being on the show, Esther. I love your work.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I think the thing that a lot of people know you for, who would listen to our podcast, is your podcast, Get Cynical. Could you describe what Get Cynical is all about?
So Get Cynical started as me and my co-host, my friend Spencer. We're just bullshitting one day, and we said we should do like a 3-episode podcast about the Nostalgia Critic because and all his big stupid crossover movies. And that really ballooned out of control, and we ended up doing a much longer season of a podcast about everything he did.
Yes. Because he has many movies. He has so many movies.
He has a lot of movies. He has a lot of side projects that we got to talk about that reveal his psyche in interesting ways. And that became Get Cynical. And when we sort of wrapped up the Doug Walker Nostalgia Critic stuff, we decided we would sort of expand the show into talking more generally about internet people I guess you could say internet people whose reach exceeds their grasp, who are trying to, create something very ambitiously, but do not ever have the talent to back it up. For our second season, we talked about YouTubers who tried to make movies. We talked about how the React Fine Bros guys made a movie, and of course, PewDiePie had a series, and Fred had a movie, and guys like that who started as YouTube sensations, and then when they tried to make the transition to actual Hollywood, it just didn't work out. And then now we're in our current season, which is season 3, which is covering the work of Max Landis, who is another one of these guys who is just has the same kind of personality as a lot of these YouTube guys, as a guy who wants very, very badly to be taken seriously as a game changer kind of guy, but who is just not talented or interesting enough in any way to make that ever happen.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a type of person, I think maybe encapsulate. Did you ever read that Don Hughes review of Baby Driver?
Yes.
So to paraphrase the review, it's, I think a lot of when white guys, let's be honest, get to film school, the one strong idea they have is I'm going to make a movie with a bunch of licensed music that I can't afford yet. And then they have a film professor tell them that film is about, the depressing weight of the, at the bottom of your soul. And then they quickly discard that idea. And then he says, Edgar Wright never went to film school is what I'm saying. So he still has this sort of juvenile idea about, what constitutes something satisfying or a good piece of art. The difference is Edgar Wright is a competent filmmaker and can, and
yeah.
I mean, that's what's funny about someone like Max Landis, too, is that he can occasionally, at least once, Chronicle is a decent movie, as you say in your reviews. So it's weird that it's somebody that knows sort of how to be good, but can't ever reach that again.
Yeah.
I guess that way, what makes him so interesting is that, whereas Doug Walker is just incompetence all the way through, Max Landis has this potential that is totally squandered.
Yeah, what makes Doug interesting, and ultimately, by the end of that season, I think we ended up having some, weird affection for him, is that, he is maybe the least talented filmmaker of all time, but he kept trying and kept his ambitions grew more and more and more, even as you could have told him right at the beginning that no, you're bad at this, you're really bad at this, but he just kept trying to make it bigger and bigger and bigger and more complex and more emotionally complex, weirdly.
Absolutely. Self-commentary.
Max Landis is totally different because he's Hollywood scion. He's like a nepotism case, obviously. He just grew up assuming that he was great. And his ambitions ultimately are a lot smaller. Like, Chronicle is a good movie. I like it a lot. But every Max Landis script and, like, pitch is ultimately the same idea. Where, like, the thing about Chronicle is, like, you think it's just kind of like a found footage movie about, you know, kids getting superpowers and fucking around, but it turns out to be a superhero origin story in a more traditional way. So it's like you get to the end and you're like, oh, this thing I was watching was actually something else all along. And that's just what every Max Landis script kind of is. He kind of just has the one trick. And that's what makes him so, like, so much more loathsome than Doug Walker, I think.
Yeah. Doug Walker at least, you know, expands his, like, his wall review is terrible, but it shows him growing as an artist, you know, in a weird way. I mean, his wall review is so terrible that there are now, like, hour-long reviews devoted to the wall review, like, multiple hours-long reviews. It's so... Like, it's so singular a piece of criticism that it extends past the criticism and becomes artwork unto itself.
Do you think he's going to do it for the other rock operas? Like, could we maybe, like, start some kind of petition to get him to do it for Tommy? Or
Tommy's the one I was I hope he does. Like, I hope that the sort of the meme that the wall review became does not scare him off ever doing anything like that again, because I would love to see it.
I mean, I love Tommy. I listened to Tommy like maybe 60 times in 10th grade, and I was like, it's me. It's me. That's me. I'm Tommy. And
I literally played young Tommy in a play, and I was in the scene where he gets molested. So that was my...
Oh, yeah.
That's
the main thing that happens to young Tommy, as I recall.
Oh, yeah, and also in the scene where his father takes him to a sex worker as well. Oh, yeah.
Nice.
Gypsy, the acid queen. I would love to see Doug Walker's version of that.
Yeah.
And the awful computer animation in the wall review is so amazing.
That blew me away. I didn't know that was coming when I watched it. It's so strange.
Like a weird cat creature of some kind?
These weird monsters. I don't know where they came from or what they're doing there.
Yeah, they're there to turn me on. That's what they're doing.
So I think starting out with Doug Walker is really interesting because he's very emblematic of this this sort of current trend of YouTubers or fame-seeking individuals, where, as you mentioned during one of your reviews, your Dear Evan Hansen review, there's a great phrase where you talk about egomania eclipsing reality. And I think that's sort of this thread of this new fame, this new social media fame, where everything has to be infused with a personality as well. It's just not enough to create art. You also have to be a talking head behind the art as well. And that creates a lot of interesting tension because what if this person is an idiot or a weirdo or, you know, and they get big anyway just because the way they've structured their reviews are sort of addictive for like a 13-year-old just clicking through the algorithm or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's why Doug Walker and all of those people around him got big, is that they all had a personality. They all had, like, lore. Like, Linkara, the comics reviewer, is, like, of all of them, I think the most invested in the lore. Famously, he has the Linkara movie that is a direct sequel to one of the Nostalgia Critic movies that Doug was not involved in. He just is so obsessed with, like, the story of all of these reviewers that he has to continue it.
Yeah. It's his own The Jesus Rolls.
It's like... I think, like, the tide has definitely turned on guys like that. Like we talk about on Get Cynical all the time. Like, you don't have sort of YouTube reviewers being like characters anymore. Yeah. Now it's you make like a 4.5-hour video essay about some fucking like Nickelodeon show, and that's what everybody wants. But like your personality is kind of irrelevant to it. They're all just pretty homogenous in terms of like the kind of person that's making that stuff.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, kind of a shame. And I think a lot of what we do at Get Cynical is get weirdly nostalgic for this objectively bad era of YouTube. Yeah. But, you know, it's you kind of can't help but miss it. Like there's sometimes hidden gems back then.
Well, some of these YouTube stars will have children of their own one day, and like Max Landis, maybe they will go on to make some more good content for us.
I can't wait for Lindsay Ellis's son, to give us his book about having sex with an alien or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, Lindsay Ellis is also she's a very interesting character in Doug Walker lore as well, because. It's funny to have somebody who's obviously much more talented, being under the thumb of a weird oppressive organization, but they are also, opprobrious in their own specific way, in their own unique. I mean, talk about Lindsay Ellis was doing a character. She's sort of the last of the characters, and her character was I like wine and I like theater, and
Exactly, like she's so fascinating because she is visibly, if you watch these, crossover movies, visibly does not want to be there, is completely half-assing it. There's a great moment in one of them we talk about where you just notice that for some of the scenes she just started wearing sunglasses inside for no reason. It's like she had a little too much to drink the night before, I think. But but it's funny because ultimately, she's the same as all of them, right? Like she went to college, but she's producing the same quality of content, really, ultimately. Yeah. And I think there was a lot of maybe some self-loathing of being involved with these people who are prancing around like idiots.
Yeah.
But I think things would have gone better for her if she had been a little more honest about not really being any better than this and just been able to have a little more fun with it.
It seems to me that a lot of these people are what someone might call theater kids. And I have a special place in my heart for theater kids because I was like a sort of a loner, outcast, loser type, and they were nice to me. So I put up with their annoyances, and they put up with my brooding cigarette smoking, like being like, "Have you guys ever smoked cigarettes before? It's cool." That was me in 10th grade, and the theater kids were like,
Yeah, I was the theater kid in that scenario. Yeah. That was my part of that equation.
I can't be too mad at them ever because I always will remember finally finding friends. So
yeah.
Yeah.
It's like whenever someone makes fun of the Gerblins people, they're just theater kids. Just let them have fun. It's okay. What harm are they? Well, Channel Awesome was doing real harm, what with all the sexual harassment. So.
Oh, they were evil. They were, that's the thing. For as much affection as I do have for Doug Walker and for some of those people, there was heinous things happening on all of those sets. Infamously on one of them, Doug just didn't know that you were supposed to provide food to your cast and crew while they were shooting these 3.5-hour behemoths. It was a lot of incompetence and a lot of just real sincere malice.
Yes.
In terms of how those people were treated that we don't ever want to lose sight of, and especially with doing the Max Landis season 2, dude's an actual rapist creep.
Yes.
As much as I find it productive to make fun of him, don't want to lose sight of that.
Yeah, whose dad is a murderer,
murdered children with a helicopter.
It was come on. It's a helicopter. What?
Look, Vic Morrow. There's always Vic Morrow. No,
I don't get the references, but
Vic Morrow was decapitated.
Yeah.
Oh, he was decapitated.
Yeah, by a helicopter.
Oh, okay. Well. I won't defend John Landis anymore.
You defended John Landis all the time.
My bad. I've been doing it a lot. Now I feel bad. I'm like, what? No, he's fine.
The Stupids, excellent movie. Excellent movie, The Stupids. And Max Landis gets covered in cum with that. Are you going to cover his Red Letter Media appearances? I'd be very interested.
We might. We're definitely doing his YouTube stuff. We're doing an episode on his infamous Force Awakens video, Mary Sue
I haven't seen that one. I saw Wrestling Isn't Wrestling and The Death of Superman. Those ones, but I don't know the Force Awakens video. What is the Force Awakens video?
This was like a world changer. This is the one where he says that the character of Rey from The Force Awakens is a Mary Sue, and this caused sort of a the prelude to the Last Jedi stuff that would happen 2 years later. That was that kind of a discourse, and it really was in that sort of just coming out of Gamergate era, I think, was like a huge deal, because he had been like a well-liked figure up to that point, and that was really the turning point with him, where people got really, really mad at him. And that was sort of the beginning of the online era where that sort of thing could happen that quickly. Where a like generally liked or beloved or at least tolerated figure is just all of a sudden a complete pariah. And again, should that have happened to him for having a dumb opinion about a movie? Maybe not. I'm glad he is a pariah now because of the other things. But, it's like,
I mean, I'm not mad at him because of that ever. I don't like that Star Wars stuff. And it's a very interesting question to me though about like how acceptable is online rage against someone who has decided, like you guys said in your podcast, to put their whole life online. That's a fascinating question. That's why I would urge people to listen to Get Cynical, because that's like, I haven't heard a lot of discussion about that. And I've seen recently, I don't know if you guys have seen this, but like the movie Prey, there's a lot of these people coming out and being like, a lady could never defeat the Predator. Which, like, what is going on with that? Why?
Very funny. I mean, it's all like spinning out from the same premise. That started, like, I think the Lady Ghostbusters movie was the beginning of this, where people were like, women couldn't be Ghostbusters, which is a fictional profession.
Right.
But the Prey one is very funny to me because every Predator movie is about the Predator getting defeated. So it's not like it's something that is like impossible. And it's like a woman could never fucking do this thing that's happened, that has happened in every movie about the Predator.
Yeah. Someone with hunting and tracking experience versus... I mean, Danny Glover's just a cop in the second movie, and he defeats the Predator. Like, what special training does Danny Glover have?
Cop training. He had cop, like, they learned kung fu,
I mean, well, that's what's very interesting about Max Landis, too, is because he simultaneously does a weird queer baiting thing where he sort of pretends to be gay or pretends to be bi.
He
but
had
also
the rainbow hair for a while.
Yeah, and which he does, it seems like, to get away with misogyny. It seems like, it's okay, I have rainbow stuff, so I can't be misogynistic, right? Which allows him to get away with all of the strange, woman fetishizing stuff in his videos. It's I don't know. I don't know where that comes from.
That is a great trick that guys pull now, where they just sort of vaguely intimate that they are some variety of queer. So it's like, this is, people, I know people like him, but this is what Taika Waititi does all the time.
Yes.
I think Peter Coffin does this too. So
this is, honestly, I think that is like in the exact same vein of like, you can't get mad at me for saying insanely misogynist shit because, maybe I'm gay. I didn't say I was, but look at all this other, it's just like, it feels like there's a new one every year of this kind of guy who will just like say awful shit and get away with it.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Taika Waititi because that brings up another classic Esther review, which is your Jojo Rabbit review, which is fantastic. As somebody, I'm Jewish. I really dislike happy Holocaust movies. And when I was a kid, I loved Life is Beautiful. Watching it later, it's an evil movie. It is an evil movie, and it should not be. All copies should be burned. Maybe not that far, but there is something about these movies about the Holocaust where Jews are sort of secondary characters, and you learn a lesson from it that is like instinctually disgusting to somebody that sort of appreciates the heft of that great crime. Can you speak a little about your review and dislike of Jojo Rabbit?
Yeah, that is, I have to say, a lot of fan bases have been mad at me in the past for things that I've said about movies. That is the most vicious I think anyone has ever gotten. Jojo Rabbit stands are insane and really mean. But yeah, no, it's a really bad movie to me. And I think you hit the main reason why, which is that, like, not that I think that you can't do jokes about the Holocaust. Like I have laughed at jokes about the Holocaust many times before.
I mean,
but,
Springtime for Hitler. Everyone likes the producers, you know.
But like the problem with Jojo Rabbit is that like it is not. Like a good Holocaust joke is darkly comic because you know how serious it is, and it's like you have that feeling of like I shouldn't be laughing at this, but I am. Jojo Rabbit is like doing the fucking like Moonrise Kingdom, like wacky fucking Nazis like prancing around and doing a goofy Hitler impression, and it is so like lacking in any actual perspective on what, like I had people say to me when I complained that like there wasn't enough of like a Jewish perspective in this movie about the Holocaust, people would say to me, but it's not about the Holocaust. It's about like Nazis in World War II. But like that is the trick the movie pulls on you. It makes like what this is actually about. It pushes it so far into the background that it becomes like meaningless, and it's becomes a movie about like a little Hitler youth boy learning a lesson about tolerance, which is an insane way to tell that story.
Yeah, that's not... a similar thing happened with Mouse got controversy. There was a Mouse controversy because that book was being banned in a lot of schools because it's...
Nudity.
I think it is the Platonic ideal of a Holocaust depiction because it's not about learning stuff. It's about bearing witness to horror, which is, I think, if you're going to depict the Holocaust... It should be that, or, as you mentioned in your review, something like Inglourious Bastards. But the thing about Inglourious Bastards, which separates Jojo Rabbit, is that it's explicitly fantasy, and it's telling you it's fantasy, and the point of it is that it's fantasy. Whereas Jojo Rabbit, there is some universal truth to be learned from this little Nazi boy learning his lesson, right?
Yeah, it wants you to take it too seriously. And if it was just goofy and wacky all the time, then like, I don't know if I would like it still, but I would at least appreciate that, like, if you want to do a Springtime for Hitler thing, then fine. Like, I think it's fine to like just crank that knob all the way up and go completely ridiculous with it. And that can be fun. But Jojo Rabbit wants to have it both ways. It also wants you to be like sincerely moved by this depiction of like this little boy learning that Jews aren't evil. And it's like, but you just like, it's been so goofy and comedic up to this point that like, if you're going to try to teach me a serious lesson about the Holocaust, then like you need to be like a serious movie. Like you can't be this completely goofy off the walls comedy.
Yeah. And you have to be Showa.
Yeah, right. You have to be one or the other. Like this is I think one of the areas where you just can't be in between. You can't half-ass it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think another comparator is like what Mouse was inevitably replaced with was The Boy in the Striped Pajamas.
Oh yeah,
which is another book about a Nazi boy, learning that Jews aren't so bad, where the Jews are secondary characters in their own story. I think that even comes up in the canonical Holocaust movie Schindler's List. Which is where the Jews are secondary characters.
They're props.
Yeah, they are essentially, they're props in a way. But Cloud Landsman, the director of Showa, famously hated Schindler's List and was like morally, philosophically against it. Are you as strongly against, depictions of the Holocaust in the Cloud Landsman sense, or are you a little more lax with it?
I mean, I am more lax with it. I think, I think it was Michael Haneke who also said, you can't depict the Holocaust on film because just the act of, like, creating a film about it and having actors and sets and lights not, like, automatically trivializes it. And you can't trivialize it. And I don't know that I, like, this is something I go back and forth on, but I don't think I 100% agree with that. But at the same time, like, to have a little thought, do a little research, take a little bit of care with, like, the story you're telling. Like, Boy in the Striped Pajamas, fucking insane book. If people don't know how that book ends, the tragedy of that book, which is like, the little kid who's like lives adjacent to the concentration camp because his dad is an officer, and he talks to a little like Jewish boy through the fence. And the way that book ends is that the kid like sneaks under the fence with his friend and goes in and gets into like a gas chamber and gets killed. And
What?
It's like, that is the tragedy. Imagine the fucking tragedy of the Holocaust is one time a little German boy accidentally got killed.
I think we can all say, the Jews, okay, that's one thing, but
a cute little kid also?
oh no.
Oh.
Bessie, you can't have gas chambers because what if a little German boy accidentally gets in there?
It's just
what if
too dangerous.
Augustus Gloop, he fell into the gas river and he got shoved up a gas? Yeah, it's I think if I'm trying to think of a more successful depiction of the Holocaust by another terrible person, another terrible director is The Pianist. It works a lot better because it's more of it's a central Jewish character. Two, no lesson is really learned. It's just you bearing witness to the survival of one person. But it's funny because they always in this movies there's one good Nazi, and that's a trope that's been way back in The Great Escape. There's like a good Nazi. What is that? Why is there always a good Nazi?
It's from my Jewish perspective, I liken that to how the Martin Freeman character in Black Panther.
Yes, the CIA
all right,
agent.
we need to have one white guy in there for the white audiences to identify with on this adventure, and that's what I think that's about. I think it's a non-Jewish audience watching this Holocaust movie is going to be like, I can't really see myself in all these Jewish people. What if there was just one Nazi who wasn't that bad? And it really goes to show something. It goes to show something. And we're not really going to get into what it goes to show. We're not going to think about that.
Yeah. There's always, I think there's even a Jerry Seinfeld joke about how there's one half-hearted Nazi who's giving the Heil, he's not really into it that much. They say Jerry Seinfeld's not funny. He had some okay jokes in there.
Yeah.
He had some
Who says he's
jokes.
not funny?
Lots of people. Well, because he makes, what's the deal with airline peanuts? The classic
That's good
hacky
stuff. That's good.
He never said that. He never actually said an airline peanuts joke, though.
Well, they did a whole show about him being in first class and Elaine has to go back to third class or second or whatever it is, economy. That whole episode was airplane stuff. I like Seinfeld. I like Seinfeld without Larry David as
interesting. You like seasons 8 and 9?
Yeah, the Puerto Rican Day Parade. Very funny
well,
stuff.
I don't know. That's that episode.
What? You don't like the Puerto Rican Day Parade?
No, I mean, no. That one's one of the weakest ones.
That's one of my
Are you trying to troll me? Are you trolling me right now?
No.
Are you trolling? You love the Puerto Rican Day episode?
I love that. Okay, when the Kramer and George and Jerry all are pretending to be their different characters that they've made up in the past in the show to get into a real estate showing to use the bathroom, and they have to have a conversation. It's like something like AJ Pennypacker, Art Vandelay, and one other whoever the other
whatever
guy is.
Seinfeld's. But I love that. That was the closest Seinfeld ever got to a Marvel's Girls Get It Done moment. That was their big. Everyone's coming together, because it was the second to last episode, so they all had to make the references to make everybody happy.
I'm a sucker for Seinfeld. I saved up my money in high school to buy the Seinfeld DVDs when they were released on DVD, and I got the little puffy shirt in a box, and I was putting it on display in my bookcase. I got a puffy shirt. My dad bought me a puffy shirt. It's very embarrassing. I love Seinfeld. Larry David's he's a mean man.
Speaking of Larry David and a source of Jewish humor, a very good piece of criticism I find in your Jojo Rabbit view, and a good way to analyze stuff from at least depicting Jewish stuff perspective, is the Schlemiel and the Schlimazel analysis. Can you tell us about your Schlemiel and Schlimazel analysis, Esther?
This is two sort of classic archetypes, comedic archetypes in Jewish, American Jewish comedy particularly, where the idea is that, the two ways to laugh at a character is you have the Schlemiel, who is a guy who spills his soup, and he has this foible that is sort of understandable and relatable. Mm-hmm. And then the Schlimazel is the guy who has soup spilled on him, and it's more like you're laughing at him. It's almost like a Schadenfreude thing, his misfortunes. You're not supposed to relate to him, and you relate that to Jojo Rabbit. This idea that the way that you're laughing at the characters in Jojo Rabbit, the Nazi characters, is supposed to be relatable. And I found that really weird at the time. I thought, like, like the way you laugh at the Nazi characters in Inglourious Bastards, for example, is the complete opposite. They're supposed to be, they're getting fucked up in in a really sometimes hysterical way.
Yeah.
You're the sort of comedic relationship you have with them is oppositional. And in Jojo Rabbit, it's not. It's like, what if Nazis were just like us and they were going around and just having normal days and normal lives? And it's very, like, again, you need to either be a much more serious film or a much, like, darker comedy, I think, to really make that work. And I don't think Jojo Rabbit is really interested in doing either of those things.
I think there's sort of a thread in centrist liberal thought about, Nazis are people just like us, and there's just compassion that you need to show them in order to get them on the good side. Like a frequent, do you know about Daryl Davis?
I don't think so.
He's like, he's an interesting figure, but he's often held up as someone like this. He's a black guy that talks to Klan members and de-radicalizes them. And there's sort of a lot of controversy over him. I forget what the name of his documentary. I think it's called Accidental Courtesy, the name of the documentary about him. But there's one thread where he's sort of beloved among centrist liberals because he is of that belief that education is the only thing that's standing between the right wing and, good progressive values. But the other part of it is, like, it's not as if the Klan members he's converting are suddenly, voting communist or anything like that. It's not like they're still voting Republican and stuff like that. So there is, like, criticism of him in the movie too by BLM members who are saying that, like, this is nice for you. It's nice you're doing a personal thing for somebody, but this doesn't help anything in general, really.
Yeah.
And I think. I think that is true. If you can de-radicalize a person, that's a very nice thing to do personally, but it's people try and extend that out to it meaning, I'm changing the world by just changing this one person's mind, which I think is a trap that Jojo Rabbit and sort of the central liberal ideology falls into.
Yeah, because, there is always a difference between, like, how someone might act interpersonally and, like, how they act politically. Like you say, like, that if that person's still voting for Republicans, then ultimately they're still enacting fucking racist shit.
Yeah.
Even if interpersonally they might not be racist anymore. And I think, the thing about Jojo Rabbit is exactly that fallacy of, like, well, the Nazi kid, like, made a Jewish friend. so everything's fine. But, like, and interestingly, because a lot of people don't know this, the book that Jojo Rabbit is based on is very, very different. And what happens in the book is, so if you've not seen Jojo Rabbit, the idea is that at the end of the movie, the Allies come in and they sweep the town. All the Nazis are arrested, and then the Jewish girl who's been hiding in Jojo's house, who he's become friends with, finally gets to come out, and they get to be out on the open in the streets. In the book, Jojo lies to her and does not tell her that the war has ended. And for years, she lives with him in his house as they grow up together, with her thinking she still has to hide, not realizing that the war has ended years and years and years prior.
That's a horror story. That's a nightmare.
And at the end of the book, she figures out the truth and she fucking leaves. She bolts.
Yeah.
She gets away from him. And I feel like that's the much more, like, honest version of that story and that relationship. The idea that, like, whatever relationship these two had was entirely conditional on, like, the fact that she had to be friendly with him to stay safe, basically.
Yes.
And as soon as she doesn't have to anymore, she just goes. Whereas the film version is much more like, no, they have, like, a real, genuine friendtion in this insane circumstance. Yeah,
because that first version is the bearing witness to horror. That's a much better, version of, even like in even in Band of Brothers. There's that scene where they're going into Auschwitz. That's a much better depiction of the Holocaust, in my view, in Spielberg's Ring than Schindler's List. But yeah, so we can't talk about, this is a very heavy subject, and we're talking about filmmakers we dislike. I mean, Taika Waititi, I don't even hate him that much. He's recently gotten a lot of scorn, Max Landis-like, from the Mary Sue thing because of this sort of, recently from a very transphobic post from his past that resurfaced. What you gonna, that every celebrity was tweeting like that in 2013. But But I like Hunt for Wilder People. Maybe because I like Sam Neill a lot. That does a lot for me.
Yeah. I
like What We Do in the Shadows.
Couldn't bring myself to watch Wilder People. Is it really good? Is it good?
It's not really good. It's very sentimental and cloying in that Taika Waititi way. But the actors are really good. The little kid in it is very good, and Sam Neill is very good, which is why the movie, I think, is beloved. But yeah, let's talk about movies we like now. Specifically, Esther, I know you are on a cultural revival of a certain filmmaker that has been reviled for years, but is now being reappraised as maybe a genius. Of course, we are talking about M. Night Shyamalan.
I was going to say, that could be a lot of people for me, but I was hoping
yeah, that is true.
I adore him. I think he is really treated unfairly in the middle of his career, especially by people who didn't get what he was going for. I mean, there's situations like people should just rewatch The Village because The Village is just a great movie, and I think people were unfair to it at the time because of the expectations that he was going to be like I think there's literally a Newsweek cover of him that just says the next Spielberg. And he was never going to be a Spielberg type filmmaker. He is much, much like less of a crowd pleaser than that. And I think like if you look at a movie like The Happening, I think that's the great example of like The Happening is a really funny movie because it is a 50s B movie. That's what he's trying to make. He is trying to make something that is, not self-serious or self-serious in a way that is like self-effacing deliberately. Yeah. And you can see that in some of the performances in that movie. Like if you're a Succession fan and you want to see a great small Jeremy Strong role as this as this Southern soldier, very, very funny.
That's great.
The Happening's a very funny movie. And then his everything since The Visit, I think, is just excellent. And I think
Old was fantastic. I loved Old
is
so
great.
much.
I rewatched it the other day. I love Old. Old is a great example of like what he does with the camera in every scene of that movie is like no other filmmaker would think to shoot that scene that way. Like there's a great scene where they're doing this surgery on this woman, and you just see it from the perspective of like, her torso, and as they're like people are freaking out and talking and trying to get this like tumor out of her, the camera's just like drifting up and up and up past their faces into the sky, and it's like no one would ever think to shoot a scene like that way, where like everything is off screen and growing more and more off screen, like floating away from the characters. And it's just like fascinating the choices that he makes, that some people I think just like instinctively tag as bad because they're different. When to me it's like, this is fascinating the way that he's approaching this.
Old is marked by great camera. Like in the opening scene when the parents are arguing, there's this amazing dolly shot sequence where he's just panning throughout the hotel room that they're in. It's like very unique. It's weird that they were saying the next Spielberg, because if anything, I think the practice he inherits is from Roger Corman. He is like he's in that vein, very similar. But it's like he's making these B movies, but with this A-level technical mastery, which is what I think creates the unique quality of M. Night Shyamalan movies.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you see it with Split too. Like Split is a very like a B movie concept. But it is taken to this sort of like, because he approaches it so sincerely, he takes it to this new sort of height, and this new like genuine emotional resonance. And I don't think all his films work. I think that like The Last Airbender is the one that I'm like, I think swing and a miss for reasons that are outside of his control. And in some ways, like you can't that was a 22 episode season of television that he tried to squeeze into 90 minutes. Like it was just never going to work. And some of the casting, obviously people got upset about.
The whitewash casting.
The racial issues in The Last Airbender are very strange because in the show, the Fire Nation, the bad guys, all the design is taken from like China, and like the Water Tribe is supposed to be like Inuit, and or I'm sorry, the Fire Nation's Japan,
the Fire Nation's China,
and the Air Nation is like Tibetan monks or something. In the movie, everyone is white, except for the Fire Nation, who are all Indian.
Yeah, which is interesting coming from an Indian guy.
It's a very, very strange decision he made that I still can't wrap my head around.
It's also just the movie where he's most out of his element.
Yes.
Pun intended. And he's, but yeah, I've never thought of him as a high fantasy sort of epic movie type of guy. He works really well in these contained sort of drama pieces with a lot of characters. Like one of his most famously reviled movies, Lady in the Water, I think is actually deserving of immense reappraisal. It's actually pretty good upon rewatch. And a lot of people have a problem with that movie because he casts himself as the writer that will save the world in it.
Yeah. Again, but again, I think clearly tongue in cheek. I think it is unfair to assume that he was being that in doing that, he was being yes, this is how I view myself.
Yeah. I mean, he has, Bob Balaban as a cartoonishly evil critic in it, and that's, he can't... Yeah, people thinking that he's being serious is, maybe the biggest hamper to his appraisal.
Yeah, they think he's being serious when he's not, and I think it makes them unable to see, that when he is being serious, it really works a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. The stuff at the end of Old, which I guess I won't spoil if people haven't seen it.
Thank
came out
you.
a year ago.
Alex spoiled Nope for me last week.
Sorry.
Or no, 2 weeks ago.
Movie I really liked, by the way. But
I'll talk about Nope. I can talk about... Wait, Steven, have you seen Nope yet?
No, and if you keep spoiling it from it, I'm going to quit. I have to wait until it comes out on the TV.
Yeah, Old is really good. And it also got criticized for having that clunky expositional dialogue. But I like that clunky expositional dialogue. That's the vibe, I think that he gets away, he gets away with it because half the characters are supposed to be kids, I think, right? They get away with a lot of exposition early because the kids are going around and asking all the characters their profession. To me, it's that's, I don't know, that seems like a thing kids would do. They would, if you're 6 years old. I don't know. I think he is unfairly maligned because his scripts and the performances he directs don't often sound like what people think is real. I think people have an expectation of what a movie should sound like, so they think when something doesn't sound like that, it's not real. It's not realistic. A movie should sound like Michael Clayton.
Yeah, but people in real life don't talk like that. It's a completely different rapport and energy that people actually would have when they're not being scripted.
Mm-hmm. It's I try and think of the stuff that is most similar to real life dialogue, and all I'm thinking of is the new Smiling Friends special where they're just
yes. No, absolutely. That is that is perfectly captures how people talk to each other, how people talk over each other and interrupt each other. God, what a great episode. I wonder if they
probably weren't inspired, but it very much reminds me of Robert Altman. Yes. I don't think the Smiling Friends guys, I don't think they've seen Nashville, but if they have, I'd be totally surprised. And I just love that show. I talk about it anytime I get an opportunity because as someone who draws as well as a cartoonist, it's a big deal for me. Yeah.
There's a Get Cynical bonus episode about Smiling Friends because those guys started on YouTube.
Yes.
So we counted it. So if, I'll plug the Patreon maybe at the end of the show.
Hell yeah.
But, if you do that, you can listen to that and all our bonuses.
Nice.
So M. Night Shyamalan. I want to talk about Shyamalan more because I think there is something... There is something opposite about him to the figures of Doug Walker and Max Landis, where it's very much he doesn't have this outrageous egomania, or maybe he does. But every time I've seen an interview with him, he seems like a humble, sort of down to earth guy who's just trying to. He likes this. I want to tell a scary picture. I want to tell a story. He has that sort of Corman-like, workman-like. Where art and commerce meet. We're telling a picture here.
Yeah, you never see him say, I'm going to make the kind of movie that no one has ever seen before. And, that kind of ambition, I think his films are ambitious in a lot of ways, but he doesn't have that, egomaniacal, approach where it's I'm going to make the best movie of all time. He's making just kind of the movies that he would like to see and want to make and saying the things he wants to say, and I think very humble ways, I guess, as compared to some other filmmakers, maybe.
So you are a media archivist through your education. What interests you in that field?
I first got interested in it because a good friend of mine named Alyssa, if she's listening, went to a film archiving program in New York and would, show me these pictures of like film strips that she was inspecting and like, and I'm just like, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is what I want to do. Cause I went to undergrad for just sort of generic film production, film studies. And like, you can't really find work unless you move to Los Angeles, that's not going to like get you a job really. So I was like, I'll go into this, archiving field. That seems to be like really interesting, and it became a real passion for me. And I ended up writing my graduate thesis on podcast preservation, actually.
Oh,
a
very
underexplored
interesting
field, yeah. Which is funny to me because it is such a huge medium of expression now.
Yeah.
I think almost past the extent that people in just, speaking from like the archiving field, I think people will sort of treat it as disposable because it is so easy to produce and there are so many of them. If you think about a film, like, which takes so much effort to make and which are in, certain terms, like pretty rare compared to, any other art form or my point is there's billions of podcasts, right?
Yes.
There are so many, and the task of preserving them seems so difficult to approach that I think a lot of people would just say kind of, why bother?
Yeah.
But to me, it's like, we should preserve these. And even if they are almost all just kind of produced by normal people, we should teach people how to preserve their own material, because people will just put stuff up on Apple or on iTunes and on Spotify and not really think about it, right? Like,
yeah.
These platforms that could just, tomorrow, if they wanted to, they could just delete everything you own.
Absolutely.
For no reason.
And dead media is like a huge problem. Like, you can't access Kelly cartoons from The Onion from like more than 3 years ago because VC came in and fucked the entire back end up. So
exactly, yeah. People have to like take this into their own hands at a certain point, I think.
Yeah, the preservation of digital media is extremely difficult. Are you familiar with IPFS?
Sounds familiar.
It's Interplanetary File System. It's unfortunately named, but the goal is I think more preservation of digital media, because online there's this problem of link rot, where you can't depend on a link if it's more than 5 years old. There's so many links out there that have become dead because people stop paying the fees to maintain the website. The website goes dark. And, for this podcast, we rely on uploading to Google Drive. And if we ever do something where I upload it to Google Drive and there's like a copyrighted song and Google scans it, they could lock us out of our account forever. And then I'd have to rely on the podcast host. And if we ever do something they don't like, they could lock me out forever. So what can I do? I can put it on a hard drive, which has a lifespan of maybe 10 years. So I got to keep doing hard drives. So IPFS is like trying to have like a distributed way of decentralized they use all the crypto buzzwords, which makes people kind of disregard it. But it is not related to cryptocurrency. It's just like set up to be used with the crypto stuff, which I kind of find annoying, but it's like a worthwhile thing to look into because it is one proposed way of trying to preserve online media. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting. I do think, like you say, in general, I always say it's good to have redundancies. It's good to have, sort of the general, the 10 commandments of digital preservation, like to say that you should have, in an ideal situation, files stored in different formats and in different physical locations. And if you really want to get into the weeds, they talk about how you should have them stored in like different climates that are subject to different like freak weather events. So you'll have one in a place that's subject to like earthquakes, but don't want them in two places that are subject to earthquakes, because if the earthquake one goes down, you want one in the hurricane zone, and hopefully that one survives. But yeah, like I in my thesis I talked about how like ideally you want to have stuff stored both on a physical hard drive and in some sort of digital cloud storage. And unfortunately, like, you know, the unfortunate fact of it is like you're probably going to have to interact with an evil corporation at some point in this process. There's kind of no getting around it. But, you know, that's what's great about having a physical hard drive is like no matter what, if you know, Jeff Bezos decides he's just going to zap all your shit one day, you still have it physically.
That file format thing, though, is also interesting because there could come a time where your file format is no longer supported by any computer that's around.
Yeah.
So it sort of is why we need like an open, free internet that, you know, free not as in freedom of speech, or I'm sorry, not as in free beer, but freedom of speech. Like all the buzzwords that the Linux guys are constantly talking about when they're not being reactionary.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, people really take for granted that, like, if I have a file, then it'll just be there forever. And it's like, well, even if that's true, there are probably, you know, think about whatever computer you used 15 years ago. There are probably files on that you couldn't use on your current computer because programs, you know, stop being updated and, you know, whatever thing you have that could open that file just doesn't work anymore. There's a great story I read recently about this piece of software that was basically like a computerized way of teaching bar and bat mitzvah students to like chant their Torah portion. So they would put it in and it would like,
that rules.
You know, it would be like a MIDI thing, right? So it would tell them like the intonations and stuff. And just like every synagogue uses this apparently. But the guy who made it in like the 90s just died. And it was like, well, that's it. Because if he can't update the licenses anymore, it's just going to stop working one day. And there are people who are like desperately trying to find a way to like basically rebuild it from the ground up. But yeah, like that is the sort of, that's an example of like digital media and digital software is in some ways like way, way, way more precarious than physical.
It is.
You know?
And a lot of these like evil corporations that you mentioned depend on open source software that is often maintained by one person, and when they die, that's kind of like there's like kind of screwed. There's recently a JavaScript developer who kind of had a breakdown and intentionally corrupted some of his projects because major corporations were depending on them and not funding him at all. And his name was dragged through the mud online. No one will work with him. And I thought that was just really sad because his point is correct, which is like we all are depending on these open source software developers to fix software for free so that huge companies can make billions of dollars. So that's just tangential to preservation, but like open source software is very important, and it makes me sad when everybody's using Windows.
I think point is really interesting because I think this idea of the precarity of digital preservation has cropped up a lot in our horror because lost media is now like a huge horror genre, a huge subgenre of horror. And I know there's a bunch of lost media films that you're a big fan of.
Oh, I mean, if you want to, I could talk about found footage films.
Hell yeah, found footage films.
I love them. And what's interesting about found footage films is like the way the genre has developed is a lot of great ones have moved away from the idea of the footage being found. There's an amazing film I love called The Borderlands, which I think is also called Final Prayer in some countries. I never know which is which, like what it's called in America. But look it up, especially if you liked Nope. And that's all I'll say. If you liked Nope, there's stuff in The Borderlands that is almost, you could say, was referenced in Nope. And again, I won't spoil the ending, but like the footage in that film could not be found. It's impossible. Yeah. And like, you know, I obviously the Blair Witch Project, which is great, like the sort of viral marketing aspect of it relied on the idea that the footage was found, right? Like, and the idea that it was found in real life by real people. But I think the further away you move from the possibility of that ever fooling people again, which I don't think, you can't do a Blair Witch Project again because people will just know. It's sort of the idea of the footage ever being lost or found becomes irrelevant, right? Like I think, Cloverfield's an example of something that does have kind of a framing device of like, this was found by the military at ground zero of the monster attack. But like, I'm trying to think. Paranormal Activity, I guess, did it, but like, another great example of a great found footage movie that people don't talk about as a found footage movie is the Orson Welles movie, The Other Side of the Wind.
Interesting.
Which was unfinished before he died, but later Netflix went back a couple of years ago and finished it and released it, just finished editing it. And that movie is a found footage movie. The idea is it is pieced together from all of these cameras that were filming at this event, this legendary director's birthday party the night before he died. It was played by John Huston. And that movie, like, was being made like before fucking Cannibal Holocaust, which itself isn't really a found footage movie anyway. But that's what it is. The idea is like, they talk about in the movie, it's one of the characters says as narration when the movie opens is like, the idea is we're trying to get a vision of this guy as he was through all these different viewfinders. So from all of these different perspectives of different people who are around him, how people are seeing him. And like that doesn't rely on the idea that the footage was ever lost, even though like in real life, literally it was kind of. It's just it's more the idea of a camera that is motivated by a character in the world that's being depicted, rather than sort of a camera that is just not supposed to. You're supposed to pretend it's not there. And a lot of great found footage films just sort of do away with that idea, and I think that's really cool.
Absolutely.
I could go on.
There is another thread with lost media beyond where it's like, especially with creepypasta, there is a type of lost media horror story, which is the episode of SpongeBob that will make you go insane. They banned this episode. You can't find it anymore. Or like and coming around full circle to Max Landis, who I think produced Channel Zero.
Yes, that's right.
The first season of that is of Lost Media, the children's show that makes you go insane. But I think there is something scary about the idea of something that is potentially important being lost, or something that has potentially a lot of power being lost, and rediscovering it again as like this ancient spell book, or like the Kandarian Book of the Dead in Evil Dead. It's like there's something powerful to that idea of media being lost, taking on an almost supernatural or deathly pallor to it.
Yeah. Well, especially I think in the modern day when we just expect everything to be available all the time, right? Like to me, when if I'm ever looking for a movie and it's just not anywhere, I'm kind of like, oh man, that's fucking weird. Like, why can't I find it on my pirate sites or on any streaming or on DVD? In fact, that has been an issue on Get Cynical, because a lot of these movies we talk about on Get Cynical have just been erased from history.
Are you telling me the distribution for Me, Him, Her is not so robust?
That was the hardest one to find. That's the hardest one to find. The Max Landis movie, Me, Him, Her, is not on any streaming. It is not. No, there are no torrents of it. No one wanted to torrent this movie. The only DVD you can get is like from Germany. We had to go to one of those sites that's like moviesabc.ru to find Me, Him, Her.
I like the idea that people in Russia are like, they're just getting Max Landis now. That's so incredibly. That's very funny, because also, Red Letter Media reviewed Be Him Her because they were still friends with Max Landis at the time, and they hated it, which is really funny. This guy who we're ostensibly friends with and who hooked us up with Macaulay Culkin. Yeah, the movie's not good. We'll be honest about it. I wonder, no one's really grilled them on that. No, I don't think the RLM guys have ever addressed that. It'd be funny if they did.
I think they're guys who just and we talk about this on Get Cynical too, like sometimes guys just get away with that stuff.
Yeah.
And it never comes. We just recently did a bonus episode on the Derek comedy movie Mystery Team.
Oh yeah. I love
and
Derek
we talked
comedy
about how
back
like
in the day.
Yeah, like Donald Glover. I mean, he's great in those old videos. Like, just like immediately apparent what a talent he is.
A big star. Yeah.
Yeah, but like those videos are like there's some edgy shit in there, and like it's just funny that like his career exploded, and he never had the moment of people going back to those old videos and being like, "What the fuck?" Like, what is he? Donald Glover was doing these like rape jokes and stuff. Yeah,
bro rape was one of their biggest videos.
Yeah, and he has just skated on it entirely, and I just think it's funny. Like, yeah, sometimes the call out post just never comes for people.
Yeah. Also, like if you're as skilled as Donald Glover, like I don't even like Atlanta that much, but he's clearly like I don't think he's like it's the best thing ever, but he's clearly an extremely talented performer.
Yeah.
It's funny to like he was also like writing the best 30 Rock jokes at like age 23 or something like that. Incredible stuff. And you know, I prefer early, not as serious Donald Glover when. Soon as he gets the beard and, you know, that's when shit changes. He's still good, but it's not my favorite stuff anymore.
Yeah.
I just thought of something that's completely unrelated. To Catch a Predator, the movie, and it's The Predator.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Right.
So it's Chris Hansen saying, "Have a seat over there," to the Predator.
Right,
and it's the Predator.
Instead of trapping the Predator with, you know, ropes or contraptions, they've entrapped him by, you know, online in chat rooms.
Yes, they do. They send him sexy. They send him sexy text messages.
The problem with that is Chris Hansen is a Mary Sue.
He could never catch the
Predator.
Predator.
It's unrealistic.
Too perfect. Yeah,
no one could catch that many predators.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. You know, if a predator could tear through fucking Jesse Ventura, no way, Chris Hansen. Shaven. You know what I love about the original Predator movie? How Bill Duke's just always shaven himself, and it's never addressed. That's just like, where did that come from? Was that in the script? Was that just like something they added to? I mean, I love it. It adds so much to the movie, and like that's a character with very little dialogue that like gets a lot of emotional beats. So it's like. Yeah, they just don't do stuff like that in movies anymore because then Logan Paul will be like, why did they shave the... what was the point of the fucking razor?
Yeah. I have to say, back in the day, like 8 years ago, when the Russo brothers said that they tried to make one of the Captain America movies like CinemaSins proof, that was the moment I remember thinking like, oh man, it's the beginning of the end.
Yeah.
You know, we're never going to get interesting movies again.
Speaking of CinemaSins and... early and YouTube and like YouTube catastrophes. Max Landis was on Screen Junkies a lot, which maybe the outing of Andy Signore as a sex pest should have been was sort of a prelude to Max Landis's eventual sex pest revelations. But it's interesting because on that show you see the power of Max Landis, and you mention it on Get Cynical. He is the best pitcher on earth. He can pitch anything. But the problem is it's all insubstantial crap. It's good elevator pitch stuff, but it's like, secretly, this island, this captain is on, he's Captain Hook.
Yes, that is the one I remember so vividly hearing back in the day. It's like, again, he is leading you towards that moment of like, oh shit, this is the thing that I recognize actually. Yeah. This is fucking Peter Pan. And because you're having that moment of revelation, you forget that like, oh wait, this wouldn't like... This is just a normal kind of boring pirate story up to this point.
Yeah. It's interesting because what M. Night Shyamalan got dogged for was that, there's a twist in every M. Night Shyamalan movie. But at least, you know, the narrative things in M. Night Shyamalan movies are thematically linked to, like, what the movie is about. Yeah. With Max Landis, it's just, like, it's another, like, Space Jam thing. It's like, here's something you recognize. It's like, this isn't something you recognize, but now here's something you recognize, and like, ooh, a reference, yay!
Yeah, literally. I mean, if you ever watch, I don't know if we're ever going to do him on the show because there's so many, but if you ever watch on his YouTube channel, his like, he has these long videos where he talks about like where his Superman comic would have gone, and he explains the story. And one thing that he says in like 3 of them, when he's trying to explain that a moment is like a big deal and a turning point, he says it's like the scene in Ghostbusters where all the ghosts get get let out. Like, that's his reference point, is just like. And it's funny because it's like, so many great directors. Like, if you talk to Martin Scorsese, he'll be like, oh, yes, this is just like the scene in The Red Shoes. I'm trying to really reference, Powell and Pressburger. And
this is like Tokyo Story or something like that, yeah.
Max Landis is like, this is just like in fucking Back to the Future.
Yeah. These 80s soy Stranger Things movies. I shouldn't call them soy, but they do seem to be beloved by the soy contingent.
Yeah. Reddit movies.
Yes. The soy contingent?
The soy contingent.
That's cool. That's too cool of a name.
The soy contingent, yeah. Max Landis really was the Reddit as an adjective before Reddit. Sort of foundational to what that is. This sort of performative nerdiness. It's not only do you like mainstream slop, the mainstream slop is the best thing ever, to the exclusion of, art.
Yeah, he really rode that wave of, like, that early 2010s, like, nerds are actually cool now. And the coolest thing you can be is a nerd. And then, like, everyone who rode that wave turned out to be a sexual predator.
yeah, that's all of them. I think that's what's also interesting about Doug Walker, too. It sort of mirrored in the Game Grumps episode with Aaron Hansen, how he's just this central figure, has these scandals keep happening around him that he has to do. Doug Walker, talk about someone that managed to dodge every potentially career-ending thing that he was associated with very impressively.
Still doing the nostalgia critic, and we talk about on Get Cynical, like, there will just always be an incoming generation of 10-year-olds for him, basically, to, like, enjoy watching the man screech at the movie. Mm-hmm. But it's fun, like, the sad thing about Doug Walker, and I encourage people to listen to the show, but, like, he tried to step away from the nostalgia critic. Like, he was done with it. He was tired of the bit, and he wanted to do other things. And people hated the other things he did so much that he had to go back. And he's been doing the nostalgia critic ever since. And, like, yeah, it is, like, it's kind of sad to see whenever I see he has a new video about, like, a new movie that's out, doing the character and doing the shtick. It's like, you were tired of that, like, 6 years ago. Like, it must just suck to be Doug Walker.
He's the Michael Corleone of YouTube. They keep pulling me back in. Yeah. Max Landis, to me specifically, what could possibly revive his career at this point?
That is a good question. Something we talk about, like, with the YouTube guys, is like a lot of them could have made pivots to be like, epic irony guys on Twitter. Or like, doing leftist podcasts. They probably would have been able to revive their careers. I think Max Landis, like, the name is just so fucking toxic that, like, I'm sure studios would give him, studio executives don't care about any of the stuff. They will, they don't care if you're a sex pest or whatever.
Yeah, John Lasseter just got a new movie.
Yeah, literally. Like, so it could happen. Like, I'm sure someone will buy a script from him again one day. But I feel like just, like, the name is so poisonous at this point that I don't see him having, like, a real resurgence in popularity. Like, nobody likes him,
Yeah.
Even like he was too soy for the right wing guys for him to even make that pivot. Like, he could have, the last saving grace of these guys is to become a MAGA guy, right?
Yeah.
Like, because those people will just buy anything.
Yeah.
But, like, Max Landis could never convincingly pull that off.
Well, that a dark harbinger of things to come is MAGA Landis in the future. Maybe it will sync up nicely with Get Cynical. Esther, thank you so much for being on our show. You're a great guest. I encourage everyone to listen to Get Cynical. It is required listening. It is like, there are a billion podcasts out there, and this is like one of the best, like, out of the billion. Like, it really is something special. And I'm so happy to have you on here today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. should I tell people where they can find stuff?
Absolutely. Yeah, plugs. Do your plugs.
All right. Well, I'm on Twitter at Cappy Baroness, CapyBaroness. And you can, I'll link to everything that I send out. If you want to listen to Get Cynical, you can Google Get Cynical Podcast, and we have a SoundCloud page. If you want to do it in your podcast app, search for Those Good Old-Fashioned Values, which is our sister show, and everything will be in that feed.
Also an excellent show.
Yes, also very good and worth listening to. And I'm on a bunch of those episodes. And then on Patreon, if you go to patreon.com/TGOFV, you can subscribe and you can get our bonus episodes, which are also very good.
All right.
Yeah, that's about it.
Hell yeah. Those bonus episodes also feature somebody who's been a guest on this show, Cole.
Yes.
He's always on point. He's a great media critic as well. So absolutely subscribe to TGOFV on Patreon to get those.
Mm-hmm. And thank you again for having me.
Oh, absolutely. This has been wonderful. And to everybody in podcast land, have a great day. Bye.